Greetings, YouTube! Longbow here. I'm sure you've recalled in the past I've mentioned I've made these fancy schmancy ebony rings here, or rings in general, out of wood. And well, in this video I'm gonna show you how to go about doing such a thing. Basically, your most simple model would be just one made of a solid block of wood, such as these. But just because it's simple doesn't mean that the ring itself has to be simple. Here we have a slave ring, which is quite intricate in its construction, and I'll be showing you how to make one of them. Next up in order of difficulty is a ring made of laminate construction. These take a little bit longer to build, but they tend to be a little bit stronger, and they're simply made out of a piece of wood that's built up from a number of other layers. This one is made from elm, padauk, and purple heart on the edges. And finally, you can go with ones with a bit more of a detail or a point of notice. And they're a bit more intricate and difficult to make. And if you don't do it properly, you can end up destroying them in the construction process. As a matter of fact, you can end up destroying any one of these in the construction process because they're damn fragile. But they're pretty. So let's make stuff. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is build one of these laminate rings. So this is just 5 pieces of wood sandwiched together, and each layer, the grain is crisscrossed. So it basically forms a piece of plywood, 5 plies thick. And the first phase is to drill a hole for the person's finger. The person whose finger I'm making this for happens to be 5/8 of an inch in diameter, so lucky me, I have a drill bit that just matches that. So inserted in here I have my 5/8 of an inch spade bit, and I'm going to very carefully and very tightly hold this and drill the hole in the center of this chunk of laminate. Now that I've got a hole, I have to cut around the hole on the bandsaw to try to remove as much material as possible before I move on to hand tools. So I'll very carefully cut around the hole on my bandsaw. First thing I'm going to do is just clean up the top and the bottom surfaces, just to eliminate any damage done from the drill press, and there was a little bit. Alright, great. Now that step's done, I've got to proceed to make it even rounder. You could do that with like a sanding wheel or a belt sander, but I'm going to go the old-fashioned route. Going to use my handy-dandy files. So the easiest way to do this, I've found, using hand files, is just you need a work surface that you can actually do a little bit of damage to, unlike my glass table. And just work your way around the perimeter. Well, it's getting there. So you can see this side is thinner than that side, so I've got work to do on the high spots, but you get the idea. Just keep doing this until it's nice and round and consistent. Well, that's one side more or less done. As you can see, the other side is still quite irregularly shaped, and I have to repeat the process with it. So, after a little bit more filing, got this thing nice and round. And the next step will be to give it a rounded side profile, such as this one. I've also got one made out of solid wood for the slave ring. This is a piece of ebony. And I've got the one that I'm going to be doing the small feature on. This one is a cat's paw. And the way the feature will be filled in is with these tiny little dowels here. Those 3 will be for the toes, and that one for the main hole. The way these dowels are made is pretty straightforward. You just slap a little piece of wood into a chuck of a drill, and then you turn it on a belt sander. Normally, when I'm drilling holes in these, I drill while it's still in like a block type format. That makes it a lot easier to handle and manipulate, and obviously it's a lot stronger in this shape. Typically I would also glue the pieces in while it's in that configuration, but I can still do it at this point. I'm using weld bond glue. It's a version of white glue. I find it's rather thick, good for applications such as this, and it dries clear, which is nice. So I'm just going to take it and apply it both to the ring itself and the little dowels, just to make sure they're wet. And I'll just pop them in place. Normally I would clamp these things in, but these are all quite tiny. And not only would the clamping destroy it, but it's not really necessary in this case. I'll just make sure they're in nice and tight, and then let that dry. So now that my glue is dry, I'll just finish this off with the sanding disc. I had to be pretty darn gentle there, but as you can see, the ebony is now removed from the surface of the Bidoof. Now I just have to work on the stuff on the interior here. And the way those internal protrusions are removed is simply with a rat tail file. Very gently file those away. So, I have a piece of 60 grit sandpaper here. And in order to achieve the profile of the side shape, I'm just going to place the ring on here, give it a slight tilt, and then drag it while giving it a bit of a twist. And when I want to switch, I just roll it forward a tiny amount and drag it. Rotate a little bit. Rotate a little bit. So I just continue that rolling and grinding process until the feature is established on one side. As you can see, the top is nicely rounded. Now I'll just flip it over and put the feature on this side now. Or the profile, I should say. So by repeating that process over and over, I eventually end up with a nice round profile on both edges of the ring, and we're pretty much done with the current grit of sandpaper we're using, which is 60 grit. I'll now double that grit and switch up to 150. I'll just continue the process. This is just to remove the marks from the previous grit of sandpaper. And by the way, the little feature rings here are rounded off in the exact same way, just the drag and roll technique. So, let's have at it. Well, there, that's pretty much done. That's after 150 grit. Starting to look pretty shiny. So now I'll move on to 220 grit, then 400 grit, then steel wool, and that should be enough to get this to a nice fine polish. There. After much work, it's now polished up. I've gotten it up to the 0000 grit steel wool at this point. Has no varnish yet, but that is the next step. Prior to applying the varnish though, I'm going to show you how the slave ring is made. Now this is the most intricate and difficult of all the ring designs I've shown you before. I'll give you a quick look of what I'm hoping to achieve by drawing a little picture. So what we have here are representations of the front of the ring and the back of the ring, as seen from this configuration. In this format of ring, that's the front, that's the back. So basically the shape I'm trying to achieve in the front profile is there will be a cutout here, and a shape like that. I'll be carving that out using this handy dandy triangular shaped file here. Then there will be an additional 2 cutouts that extend up like this from the bottom. And they will be dug out using my handy dandy rat tail round file. Once I've got those cutouts made, I'll just continue to remove material along the side here. So that'll all be removed. And then I'll just sharpen up this point. And basically that's how it's done. On the back profile, perfectly straight across the top, and that's all removed. So, time to get that done. I'll just pick a spot on the front and start gouging away material. There, I'd say that's good enough. There's the initial top profile carved into it. Now for the 2 on the bottom. You want to make sure you don't apply too much pressure while doing this, because you can actually make it shatter. Okay, well there's one of the bottom cutouts complete. Now I'll go for a second one right here. So, now here you can see all the features on the front of the ring are more or less done, the basic shape anyway. Now it's time to remove all this material along the back side and the 2 sides of the ring. And basically I'm just going to cut it right off rather than filing it. And I'm going to use this tool, known as a razor saw. It's a very thin saw blade. So prior to cutting the piece, I'm going to mark what I want removed. There, I've just drawn a little line around the edge with a pencil. And we will now cut at that line. This takes a little while.
To get his idea past the blueprint stage, Whittle needed the support of Griffith, the rest of the government.
I have your plans for a new type of propulsion system that will give us speeds up to 5.
A propulsion system he called the jet engine. The engine relied on a fan to suck in air from the front, which then compressed the air in the combustion chamber, spraying it with fuel and then igniting it. Whittle believed the burning gases would blast the plane forward at speeds of up to 960 kilometers per hour. The young inventor was sure his idea was ready, if only he could get the support and financing from Griffiths. But the senior engineer dashed Whittle's hopes.
Impressive. You'll never work.
Griffiths told him that no metal was strong enough to withstand the intense heat generated in the combustion chambers. The engine would melt.
So what he said was maybe in the future, but not right now.
But Whittle had already faced skeptics, so he just became more determined. He raised private money and spent the next 8 years trying to perfect his engine and build a prototype.
One of the reasons that the early people who heard him talk about the jet engine were sometimes negative or cautionary was the fact that they were smart engineers who knew what the problems were. And here comes this guy who literally is ahead of his time and sees challenges instead of problems and pushes.
In the spring of 1937, he was ready for his first full-scale engine test. The engine revved out of...
Alright, so I've cut that off. We now have the rough profile of the finished slave ring. Just have to trim it up a little bit with some precision files and it'll be ready for varnish. So now that I've got all these rings sanded to this super fine grit, this quadruple aught zero steel wool, they're now ready to be dipped in this little bit of varnish here. This is called wipe-on polyurethane. It's meant to be applied with like a rag or a brush. But what I'm going to do in this case is simply dip the rings into the polyurethane and then let them dry on this rod here. So let's see, what tool should I use to dip the rings into the polyurethane? Screwdriver! So I'll begin with my ring. I'll just drop it in there. It may be difficult to tell, especially with this ring, since it's already been coated a number of times. So now I'm just gonna take these various rings and dip them in the polyurethane here. It may be hard to tell, but you can actually see bubbles coming out of the wood, which means that the voids in the wood are being filled with polyurethane, and this is making it stronger. But once I've given them a good dip in the juice here, let's pick it up. Give it a flip around so that the other side can become penetrated. And once that's finally taken place, I'm going to pick it up again, very gingerly, and place it on the rod here. Next, we'll do the slave ring. Bloop. Ah, it's all good. Now I'll just let these dry off. I found that the best way to get a nice sturdy coat on these is to let at least 3 coats of the product dry before finishing. Well, it's been more than 24 hours since I applied the varnish to these things, and well, they're now ready to be recoated once again. I had to buff 2 of them a little bit because there were some drips present, but now they're all ready to be re-dipped for the second coat. For the second coat, I don't want to let it sit too long, lest it begin dissolving the original coat. Come here, you. You'll notice that by using this process I get an excessive amount of the varnish on the rings, so I just give them a bit of a shake prior to letting them dry. Oh no! Went in the sawdust. Oh, for crying out loud. Okay, I dropped it in sawdust and I also dropped it on the floor. Gross. Can this be recovered? Yay! Now another 24 hours and then I can apply another coat of varnish to these things. I like to get 3 coats because that makes it rather strong. But for the most part, these bad boys are now finished. Thank you for watching, YouTube. Had a lot of fun making these and I hope you enjoyed learning how they're made. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. And until then, I'll see you later.